Welcome back to the Milione podcast. I think I've talked about this before, but I think we just got to figure out a name change, something minted. But we already have the Minted Minutes, which is a written newsletter. And this would be easily called the Minted Minutes, but we need something else. So brainstorm, because I haven't put any thought into it. We don't have to think of it right now.
Sure, it'll be easy to figure out.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to jump right into the whole running ordeal because I feel like that's what we're kind of most focused on right now. We're a little bit over 4 weeks out from the New York City Marathon, and we just so happen to both be dealing with different types of injuries. I don't even know if I'd call it an injury. It's more just like overuse issues. I have a shin splint in my left shin that has been bothering me for kind of like 2.5 weeks, and then it came to a peak where I just couldn't complete the workouts that were on the training plan and had to take a couple of days off. Ended up taking, I'll count Saturday, Sunday, Monday off, 3 days off, which I haven't strung together 3 days of rest in almost 18 weeks, I would say, probably longer, and felt really weird. Felt being so close to the marathon date, felt like the goal time was kind of slipping away there for a little bit, but had a pretty good run yesterday, pretty good run today. Still dull pain, but just rehabbing like crazy and trying to sleep more. But I know you're also dealing with your own overuse stuff.
Yeah, I'm dealing with Achilles tendonitis, so kind of similar injuries in terms of just overuse and body kind of breaks down and doesn't have enough time to recover. So I've been dealing with that for probably like 2 to 3 weeks now, and I would say this last week was the most painful it's ever gotten. So I mean, our injury is pretty much aligned exactly, and I had to take the same days, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday is usually rest day, but took that day completely off and got through my run yesterday, but there's still some dull pain there as well. And at this point, it's, the New York City Marathon is on November 6th, and I feel like I'm just going to try to push through, and, I pray to God that there's no like significant damage where I'll be sidelined for a long period of time, but just kind of dealing with that mentally and physically, which is a lot right now.
Yeah, I think like I'm at the point now where it's so close to the marathon that it's like I can't really take a prolonged period of rest. Like it's not like, oh, let's shut it down for an entire week and do an entire week of rest. And I guess you can use, other machines like biking and swimming and stuff to keep your aerobic base. But it's like this is a really important time, especially going into the taper, that we need to be kind of locked in and doing things according to plan. I think it's funny that we both kind of ended up with these overuse injuries around the same time, kind of as the plan was peaking, I think. They probably started as we were peaking and getting into that 70-mile-a-week range because we have never run that much before. And it's funny because the last plan that we followed for the half marathon also was a Pete Fitzinger book. And as we started to peak for that plan, we could hardly hold on to the mileage. I remember we were both dealing with overuse injuries. I had some hip stuff going on. I don't even know
what my knee.
Oh yeah, your knee and then your
swollen.
foot.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah. So like, and that was like at 50 something miles per week, and now it's like 50 is a breeze, and 70 seems to be that little wall that you hit, and your body starts to break down a little bit. But it's crazy. I mean, I was kind of annoyed, so I was going back and looking through my training data on Strava and just seeing all of the miles that we've accumulated over the last 15 or so weeks doing this training, and it's wild. I feel like I've made insane progress. I don't know how much faster I've gotten in shorter distances. I mean, I've gotten obviously a little bit faster. We did that 10K time trial, but just the ability to look at a day of running and see 14, 15 miles midweek on a Wednesday morning and think, that's not that bad, because we had 18 and 20, 22 last Sunday. So it's better than that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I always find it fun to go back and look at the stats, which is why I always talk about Strava and how cool it is. Because like during the training plan, you don't really feel like you're making much progress. Each run, as your body starts to get more and more tired, because running on tired legs is how you get better at running those distances. It just feels harder and harder. So you're always like, God, why am I feel like I'm not going as fast. I feel like I'm going slow. I feel like my slower runs are getting harder. And then you look back and you're like, oh wow, at the beginning of the training plan, I was doing these slow runs at a significantly slower pace than I'm doing now. So it's cool to reflect. But then, when you're injured, it's also good to look back, because it can really get in your head. You take 2 days off, 3 days off, and you're like, my whole training plan's ruined. Like, this was all a waste. I did the worst part of it, which is like the training, didn't even make it to the race. And then it piles on, and next thing you know, you're spiraling.
Yeah. I mean, I think fortunately having the background in sports that we do, we understand how to do prehab and rehab really well. So just because we're used to it and we understand that it works, and that when you start to get these kind of persistent overuse injuries, just hammering the rehab as much as possible, doing everything you can. I think even for me, I notice like I have to string together some 8 to 9 hour nights of sleep and just let my body recover as much as possible. Because when that starts to slip, and I honestly think we're both at this spot, a mixture of the mileage peaking and the release, because we weren't getting enough sleep. And so we hit a 15-mile run off 4 hours of sleep, and then like it just continues to snowball. Didn't get much sleep that whole entire week. Still kind of trying to recover from it. And then it just breaks down. Like, when's your body supposed to recover from any of that?
Yeah, I mean that 15-mile day after the 4 hours of sleep, that was like the first time I had to cut a run early because of my Achilles. And looking back on it, maybe I should have taken that day off, or maybe I should have tried to run later, but I don't know. There was just part of me that was like, oh, like I can do this. It doesn't matter how tired you are. It doesn't matter how run down you are. Like, it's all just a mental thing. But in reality, at a certain point, your body's like, it didn't have time to recover. It didn't have time to rest. It didn't have time to, get back to where you can do those workouts at like an efficient level. So I think looking back on it, that was pretty dumb. But I think next time maybe rearranging my week and doing some of the shorter runs when I know it's going to be super busy is probably a better idea.
Yeah. It's tough because running is like half of it is the mental aspect of it, right? And I don't think you get to a place where you are running relatively fast times by just like always giving into that, oh, I should rest, or, I don't feel great, I should dial it back. I think there are some days where you have to learn to just put that to the side mentally and just kind of grit your teeth and keep running and run through it. But there are other times where you just have to learn to listen to your body, or end up in the situation that we're in. So it's a learning process like anything. Throughout this entire podcast, we'll have like some questions scattered in. I fielded some questions on Instagram. So one of the first ones was the breakdown of our running plan, types of training runs, and the Pete Fitzinger book, right? So before the half marathon that Shawn and I ran in New York City, which was the first time where we ever followed a proper training book. I just did a bunch of research on different types of kind of quote unquote gold standard running plans. And there's Jack Daniels. There's a bunch, right? There's not a bunch, maybe a handful. And kept seeing the Pete Fitzinger name come up, and I learned that he had a book called Faster Road Racing, which is for kind of half marathon and less, or half marathon and under, yeah. And then advanced marathoning, which is kind of training for marathons. So I said, why don't we give this a shot, this training plan a shot for the half marathon, because we wanted to finally break under that 1 hour and 30 mark. So we followed it. First time kind of doing mileage like that. First time incorporating speed work. First time incorporating hill work. Yeah, it was kind of brand new to us. First time ramping up our mileage that high, which was something to get used to. And we both, did relatively well on the half marathon. So I put my faith in Pete and picked up the advanced marathoning book, and Shawn and I were looking at a couple different schedules. Now this book is crazy because I think we're doing one of the lowest mileage training plans in this book. It goes like there's like a 55-60 mile 18-week plan. There's a 70 mile per week 18-week plan, which is what we're doing. There's a couple 12-week plans. There's like a 120 mile week plan. Now that is insane mileage, but if you follow any of these plans, you're probably going to run much faster. And when I was doing the research online, I was just pretty much looking for how do I run a sub 3 and what plan do I have to follow, and I kept seeing this book pop up. So we'll see what ends up happening. Right now, feel extremely confident about sub 3 and going to try to push it a little bit harder.
We have this ongoing joke that, Marcus thinks I'm not running as fast as I can be. And I disagree. Like I have good runs and I have bad runs. My goal is sub 3, and I'm not going to talk on that until I get it, because that's just kind of how I work. I like to keep more extreme goals in my head and not advertise them as much. It's just how I work. It's just like mentally it's easier on me. But sub 3 is the goal. I think that's a fair goal for a first marathon, so I'm going to keep it at that.
He could probably run a sub 250 right now.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. I just joke. I just joke with him all the time that he's sandbagging his runs, not running as hard and fast as he can. And honestly, it's like partially joke, but partially sometimes we're looking at his times and it looks like that's actually what's happening.
I think the difference is like Marcus is consistently fast. I feel as if like some runs, like I just feel like I'm running in sand, and I don't know if it's like one of those things where I just need to learn to push through, but like I start pushing through and like I feel like my body's gonna blow up, like my legs are gonna blow up, and then I'm not gonna be able to finish the run. So I take those runs a lot slower, and then like every once in a while I'll have like a really good day where I'm like, oh my god, where did this come from? And I go a lot faster. So I have no idea. I mean, Marcus can consistently go out there and like do his paces, and like I just feel like that's just not how I work. Or it's like, I don't know.
After we did the half marathon, the New York City half, like two or 3 weeks later, we had a long run on Sunday that was like 13 miles or something, 14 miles, and Shawn PR'd on it, and it was just a casual Sunday run. So that's initially where I started to make fun of him, like, dude, come on, like you're just gonna PR on a casual Sunday run in like Central Park, and you can't even PR 3 weeks, or you can't run faster 3 weeks ago.
That half marathon, if there was a time, I was not sandbagging. I think there was a mental block between the sub 130 and like my body pushed until that point, and like it just didn't and once all of that pressure was gone, because you make videos about it online and there's a little bit of added pressure, like I don't want to fail, it's pretty embarrassing. And I think once that added pressure was gone, and like we were just in Central Park enjoying, like no race on the radar, just kind of like enjoying it all, and like we were just like, oh, we should push it today. Then like it's a lot easier to do better when there's nothing online, nobody's watching.
Yeah, I do notice that as well. Sometimes I have like crazy runs where I just feel like I'm light and I'm just like floating. But I don't think it's ever like that during race day. I'm super interested reading all of the race reports for the New York City Marathon about like the crowds and stuff and how it just carries you so hard, and not to like blow up your legs, thinking that you're the fastest man in the world when the crowds are crazy dense. So I'm interested to see how that makes me feel, whether that makes like, because I think the worst thing that could happen is I get like super excited / anxious, and that will 100% toast my legs. And if that happens, I'll be really pissed because I won't have the gas and I'll just be like way too spun up. I'm hoping I can just kind of like block it out and just run my race and see, hopefully have gas in the tank after mile 20. That's really all I'm looking for, not bonk.
There's always this vivid memory I have, and I think you've had the exact same one, where I remember I was a freshman in college, and I played lacrosse in college, and it was the home opener of the season, and I was kind of under the assumption that I wasn't going to play much this season. Maybe I was going to redshirt, and then halftime, our coach comes up and he's like, "You're going in," and I was like, I had been like sitting on the sidelines, cold, like just kind of watching the game, like taking it all in.
Because the season starts in February.
Yeah, like I'm a freshman, like it was cool. It was a cool experience. We were playing Delaware, and I got in, and my legs turned to jello because I had so much, like it was like from being absolutely just chill on the sideline to all of a sudden I'm in this game, and like my legs blew up. I remember, I was guarding somebody, and I was like, man, I hope to God this guy doesn't know how I feel right now, because if he did, I was so toasted. And it was crazy. It's crazy like what the body can do to you like mentally, and like the adrenaline and all of that stuff. I have no idea how it works, but like I know I wasn't physically tired because I didn't do anything. My legs were just literal jello. It was wild.
Yeah. I had the exact same experience, but mine was during fall ball freshman year. We had this like little headstrong tournament thing, whatever. And I get in there first time, and I don't know what happened. It was literally like somebody removed all of the muscle and bones out of my legs and replaced it with sand. I was so gassed in literally 2 seconds. I had never experienced like a mixture of nerves, anxiety, like not wanting to mess up, and like just getting my bearings, that I was gassed by the time I jogged out onto the field. And like I don't even think like play had started. I was lining up for a face-off. I remember thinking, holy cow, like I've got nothing in the tank and I haven't done anything. That was one of the worst feelings ever, because you're like looking around. Like
there's like you have no control over it. It's just like there's no way to prevent it. Like once it starts, I was like, oh, like the way I fixed it was like, you come off on the sidelines and like you finally are able to reset and be like, all right.
And then
like,
it's out of the way.
Yeah, it's over with.
Yeah.
But like in a marathon, like you can't really afford that. If I had to go like half a mile on those legs, I can't imagine I would be able to come back from that.
No, and I imagine the only way to really make sure that doesn't happen is like your second marathon will be much easier than the first as far as nerves go, because you kind of have an idea of what to expect going in. But hey, we don't get that luxury. Yeah. What a wild. It's funny how we both experienced that. I'm sure a lot of people experienced that, but it was not a good feeling.
I was always jealous of those kids who, like it didn't matter to them. Like they were able to just like block out all the noise and go in there and like just play as if they were practicing in the backyard. And like those are the kids who are always also so good because they had this confidence. They had this like they didn't care about messing up. They like knew that was part of it. Um, so I just kind of need to approach the marathon like that. Just kind of go run the thing like it's another Central Park run, just now with a crowd.
Yeah, true. It's not like we haven't done the training.
Mm.
The one of the questions was lessons learned from marathon training / I'll just add it to the other one, but under it, importance of taking care of your body, because I think those two kind of go together. As far as lessons, I mean, it's always been kind of easy to just get up and do the training for whatever it is that I'm training for at the time. But for the marathon training, especially as you start to peak and get into your really long runs on the weekend, the amount of time outside of physically running that you need to be making sure you're on top of your diet and your water and your sleep. I mean, especially since we did most of this training through the heat and humidity of the summer, like if you fell behind on your water, it's not good, because there's a chance you're gonna like have to cut a run short. I think you had to cut a run short because you were just like dehydrated that one day where you're just sweating. Remember, it was humid. You were sweating so bad.
That was also like that day was hot and we got a late start and among other things. But yeah, like I definitely wasn't hydrated. I definitely wasn't prepared.
Yeah. So big lesson that we learned was, what is that noise? Big lesson that we learned was the humidity. We hadn't trained through humidity like that. So now we are spending our Saturdays, Sundays, actually pretty much specifically Saturday and Sundays, we had to get up super early to do this training, or else we were kind of toast. So whereas like all we wanted to do on Saturday and Sundays was sleep in a little bit. And when I say sleep in, I mean like sleep until 7 a.m. We had to get up at sometimes 5 to get out the door before the sun came up, because if the sun came up and the humidity was there, you were toast. I mean, I just don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, and it's like one of those things where all you want to do after like the long week of training is just like catch up a little bit, and you can't, and you have to wake up earlier because you have to eat breakfast, you have to be able to digest it, you have to get everything together, go to the bathroom, all of that stuff. And if you don't do that, and if you try to cut that area short, then you can have issues during your run. And it's like you can never win unless you really give yourself enough time to be prepared and go out there. And honestly, like I would rather make sure that happens than go out and try to force a run where like I'm not totally digested in my food. I, didn't, drink enough water beforehand. Like, because that's even worse, because the whole run you're thinking about that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just you have to be pretty regimented on like the structure of your planning and like all of that stuff, which is kind of new to me because a lot of the times I just kind of wing it and hope for the best.
Yeah, it's a massive time commitment. I was looking at my Strava, and just like the time spent running is like last month was like 35 hours running. Which, I mean, I guess over the course of a month doesn't seem like that much time. But it's an entire day, 24 hours plus of 1 month that you're just running.
Yeah.
And like I just said, all the other stuff on top of it, sleep, like making sure that's all locked in. Especially if you want to perform and like perform and push your body maybe past its potential or to discover new potential. Everything's got to be locked and loaded. Moving on to more kind of business-related stuff. Minted New York had a release. Biggest release, I would say. Most product variants by volume and most number of different products. This was both a jewelry and apparel release. We ended up flying in Clay from Detroit to help pack and ship. So we had me, Shawn, Clay, Peyton, John, and that was awesome. Having that many people made packing and shipping a lot easier. It was kind of insanely hectic and crazy there for a little bit, especially around prep and stuff. And we could have probably been a little bit more ready, but at some point you got to just put a hard deadline and do everything you can to hit it. But there were a couple things that we did mess up, right? Like this was the first time where we had a kind of like small streak of messed up orders. And it wasn't a ton when you look at it from a pure volume standpoint, like, less than like probably 0.1%. But it's not good, right? You don't ever want like customers to have those types of experience. Specifically, it was a couple jewelry orders that came packed, shipped, but the jewelry itself wasn't inside the pouch or the box. And obviously get something out in the mail as soon as possible to those individuals. But I think on like bigger than that, it's you lose the opportunity to have that initial first good impression with a customer, and you're playing catch up. So you obviously do whatever you can to make it right to them. And then from like an operations standpoint, now you have to figure out, well, what is causing the issue of an order going out without the item inside the package. And so you have to kind of work back from, well, where and what steps can be eliminated to remove the chance for that happening. I recently had read that in warehousing, it's good to not keep product variants near each other. So if we had 2, 3, 4 pack of jewelry, you would keep them in opposite areas of the warehouse so that you cannot accidentally grab the wrong item. And I don't think that would necessarily have solved this. I think what would have solved this was making sure that we were grab and go pre-packed to get these orders out. The jewelry was the last of the product to come in. So we had it pre-packed in the anti-tarnish bag. Now the steps go anti-tarnish bag, green pouch, brown jewelry box, and then packed into the actual box, card, seal, ship. And by not having it packed in the tarnish bag, in the green pouch already, inside of the jewelry box so that it's labeled in a bigger box and you can just grab it and go, we are adding the steps of grab it with it in the anti-tarnish bag, and then grab a green pouch, grab a jewelry box, and then put them all together, and then pack it up into the box, put the card in there, seal it, and ship it. So immediately right there, too many steps and too many potential areas for failure along the way. So going forward, the best way to reduce that would to just be make sure it's pre-packed, which is hard because it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot of work because, and you try to figure out like where it went wrong because like the people who were getting the boxes were getting the brown jewelry box, but nothing was inside the jewelry box. So it's like, was there a mistake where we didn't pack them into the green pouches, or did we pack them into the green pouches and then we just didn't put the green pouch into the jewelry box? So you don't necessarily know, and like that's kind of where it gets confusing. And it's one of those things where it's like packing those orders is sometimes so mundane. While you're doing it, you pack so many orders in one day that like it can get you can easily get sidetracked and like start thinking about something else in your brain, and then like go on autopilot and mess up and like forget a whole batch, which I think is what happened. But I've caught myself like taping the box up, while I'm thinking about something, and then realizing like, oh, I haven't even done anything to this box. Like I'm just taping it up. So it's one of those things where it's like, you don't think it requires that much focus, but it kind of does, especially when everybody's moving around the warehouse, when people are like, hey, can you pass me this? Can you pass me that? It's one of those things where it's like trying to find the best system in the warehouse to foolproof any sort of mistake that could happen. You can never fully make it foolproof. Well, I'm sure you could, but that would require a lot of money, I assume. So just finding those ways, just small things even, that will eliminate, maybe a % chance that you mess something up. Kind of what we're trying to figure out now.
I think this ties into somebody's questions about the trials and errors of growing a brand. They ask for the largest ones and how we handled them. I think from the last release, that was probably the biggest mistake. Like I said, you only have one chance to make a first impression on a customer, especially, a lot of people from the community of the brand are super excited when they buy their piece or get their first item. So you want it to be good, right? Like that's the whole point, is commitment to the customer. In the past, I've talked I think about this one before, but the original mesh shorts that we made, I have a maroon batch and I have a black batch in the warehouse, and I sampled them as single-sided mesh, which if you purchased recently was the original design. And then I got nervous after the first sampling and decided to double layer the mesh because I was a bit nervous about the see-through, and then realized it didn't really matter. And so I double layered them and went into production without resampling, without even thinking that it was going to change how they fit on body, adding a whole nother layer of mesh fabric. So they come in, I spend, I don't even remember how much we spent, probably a couple thousand at least, 10, 15,000 on these shorts. And they come in, I put them on, I'm like, holy shit, like I'm not releasing these. I will not put these out, like they don't fit right. And there was pretty much a non-negotiable in my head, like they weren't getting released. I didn't really care, if we had to eat the loss on them, because I'm not gonna put anything out that I'm not happy with. But it was just frustrating because, the cash could obviously have been used and made the product the right way if I had just resampled. I think I was just rushing and wanted to get them made. And you know what? You live and you learn. That's probably the biggest one from like a monetary standpoint. What are some other ones?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two things here. It's like, the reason that the jewelry mistake was so big is because like that's going to the customer, and then the customer is opening it, and like it directly affects their experience. Mm-hmm. We make tons of mistakes where like it just affects us, and like we waste some of our time. But like those are more like, those aren't as bad because it's not like nobody's seeing what's exactly going on. Like there's not like a bad portrayal of like we messed up and like we sent you something that wasn't even in the package. So there are a ton of small things that I think we, mess up on, but like nobody knows about because that's just part of doing business.
Yeah. I can't really think of any other huge ones. I mean, not really a mistake, but probably a bit short-sighted is the size of the warehouse we're in right now. Like we probably should have gotten bigger right off the bat, but it's hard to know, like it's not because we signed this lease probably 6 months ago, and we're going to have to move to something bigger. So we're going to have to pay somebody to move the warehouse because it's, tons of pallet racking and pallets and product and all that jazz. So it's going to be an expense that probably could have been avoided, but by just getting a bigger warehouse in the beginning. But I mean, like I said, it's hard to say. And we were kind of, I feel like everything has kind of been super there's just been a huge time pressure, because like we had to get this warehouse. We had a shipment coming into a port and we didn't have anywhere for it. We couldn't put it in our parents' house. It was like tons of pallets of product. So we had to get something before the ship arrived. So we were kind of at the mercy of what was available on the market.
Yeah, and I think like that's also just part of the learning curve. Like, because when we looked at the warehouse, we were like, oh, this is plenty of space, and then you don't really realize how much goes into actually making a warehouse work.
We didn't even know what a pallet rack was.
Yeah, like shelving. Like, we didn't think we were going to need shelving. We just thought we could just line everything up on the floor. So, learning about just warehouse and warehouse flow and like what you need in an actual warehouse is like, that's a whole nother thing. And we had absolutely zero knowledge of all of that stuff. So just kind of trying to figure it out and like, Googling what are other people doing? Like, how do you solve this problem? How do you like, make a warehouse efficient? And just
it's not like there's a course. I mean, there wasn't a course at my school that taught you, here's how to start a business, what you have to do. And, oh, by the way, if it's a business that involves logistics, here's how you set up your warehouse most optimally. Like, I didn't even know how to use a pallet jack rack thing. I don't even know what it's called.
I mean, I still don't know how to use it. Honestly, like the way you drive them, it just doesn't make much sense to me.
Yeah, it is funny to watch Shawn use the pallet jack thing. Strategy for approaching big project. How do you get the motivation to attack these massive projects? I mean, I think when they come to fruition, they look massive, but they don't, like, especially, I guess when we're planning, it doesn't feel massive. I kind of try to, I know for me, just like look at the end product, right? Like, if this were to go perfectly, how does the end product look like? Like whether it's an experience or a product itself, and then kind of work back into all of the little pieces that are going to make up a successful product or experience or anything, right? And then it's just a matter of figuring out all of the little puzzle pieces that are going to go into that big picture, and then doing them, lining them up, and putting them all together. There's a saying that I heard when I was in college is, how do you eat an elephant? With one bite at a time. And it's kind of that same mentality of just, small, steady progress toward a larger goal.
Yeah, I think the best way I could describe it is like, oftentimes before drops, I look at the big picture of like what needs to happen before the drop, and then like I get very overwhelmed because I'm like, there's so much shit that needs to happen. Like, how is this gonna happen? And then I find that like if I just am like, okay, like let's just bang out this one task, and like once that is over with, it can be off the plate and we don't have to think about it anymore. So then you just go from there, and then you're like, okay, one thing down. Let's not think about the whole slew of other things we have to do. Let's just knock out another thing, one thing down. So kind of like chipping away at it, and then eventually, you'll get to where you get. If you didn't prepare well enough, then like you'll get to where you get. There's no point in like thinking about what you didn't do, because that's not helping you progress to like, the end goal.
Yeah, I also think, especially when, for us, there's things that need to be done in the warehouse that can't be done at home. And so kind of prioritizing getting the stuff done in the warehouse that we need to get done, and then saving some of the tasks for just at home. I know for me, a huge point of stress is the size chart, the email that goes out to everybody, the product photos, like that sequence of getting the product photos, making the size charts, getting the email ready is long and like arduous, right? Because I think it's most stressful because I know how much else needs to get done physically. Like in the warehouse, stuff needs to be moved, prepped, sorted, packed, whatever. And when I am doing the stuff on the computer, I cannot be doing anything else. When I'm doing the stuff in the warehouse, I can at least be thinking about other stuff that needs to be done and kind of like rank sorting it in my head, uh, in like prioritizing. But yeah, like when I'm on the computer, it's like completely man down. Can't really do anything else, and that's why it kind of gets left for the last minute. And so for the last couple of drops, this last drop was a little bit better, but the last couple of drops, the email doesn't go out till like really the day before. It's just because that's I get pushed up against a wall and have to get it done. So I have to drop everything else that I'm doing and just make sure it goes out and gets done.
Yeah. I think it'd be, just trying to find ways that we could like knock stuff out along the way where it's not like, oh, we're in the mode of like pre-release, and like trying to figure out things we can do where it's like, oh, let's just knock this out now. So like when a release does come around, we don't have to think about it. And we got on the phone with Clay and we talked to him and like, we were like, this was your first drop. Like, how'd you feel about it? Like, have any tips? Like, what do you think could have been done better? And I think addressing those things is good, and like sitting down after all of the hecticness, because during it doesn't, you can't fix anything during the prep. You have what you have. So like kind of reflecting on it and trying to figure out, what maybe next time we do this instead of that, I think is good. And I think that's good that we're doing that.
Yeah. I think that was kind of a newer addition of just like, what are you guys? Because I have a million things going on in my head. So it's like sometimes obviously I'll miss stuff and everybody sees things differently. So I try to give feedback on what are you seeing and like what processes could be improved and like what's slowing us down, just all that type of stuff, to try to smooth out processes. And as we continue, because I've talked about this before, but as we continue to grow and each release is bigger and bigger, a process that worked 2 releases ago and doesn't end up working anymore. So you're kind of like hot fixing all of these smaller things. So the more feedback that you can take in and use to improve processes, the better. So it was good to kind of field that feedback from Shawn and Clay. One of the questions was collaborations Minty would like to be a part of, other small clothing brands or even bigger brands. Interested to see if this is something you have thought about. Man, I mean, there's obviously the athlete side of collaborations. I think anybody that played sports competitively at any real level, the dream was like to collaborate with Nike. I think that's kind of still something we'd love to do down the road. Just such a storied brand. And I think there's a lot of fun stuff we could do around that, around like running and stuff. Who knows? As far as like clothing brands, I don't really know. I mean, I like what we're doing, kind of just putting out our own stuff. And I'm sure if the right collaboration partner came around, we'd be open to it. But for right now, it feels really cool to just kind of own the space that we're in and to continue to make stuff. And I don't know. I feel, sometimes I feel that brands use collaborations to kind of branch into kind of like something outside of their core product offering. I don't really know if we have a core product offering, which is cool because we've been able to kind of just make things in a bunch of different categories. And feedback has been great. So I don't see a reason to stop that.
Yeah. I mean, I always, like Marcus said, think about it from like an athletic standpoint, just because I don't know. Whenever I think of collaboration, that's kind of where my head goes. But you know, as Marcus said, I think collaborations do have to be strategic. Um, there are some collaborations that I see where I'm like, that doesn't, like, how do those two go together? And like, they just kind of slap a brand name on something that's totally unrelated, and like, I don't know, that feels a little bit like strange to me. It just like, I feel like both have to fit, and like, it's got to be like a team instead of like, you know, one person is just like, all right, just slap your brand on this and like we'll sell it. So that's kind of my thought.
Yeah. I mean, with all of our products, like I'm kind of just obsessed with the process behind it. So if there was no real process, then it just, what's the story of the item, I guess, if you're just, you know, I mean, they're taking an existing product and then you're just putting, you know, a collaborative logo on it. I don't know. Maybe that could work down the road, but I like to try to like not over-engineer, but engineer something new. Or especially if you've got two people together, it's like, well, what are the limitations of the collaboration, and what, you know, from a manufacturing standpoint, what's possible and what's not possible, right? Because sometimes you really can't. There's not a whole lot of freedom over the physical design if manufacturing is in place. And then just kind of working from there, working backwards. What does taking risks mean to you, and how has that shaped what Minted is becoming as a brand / label? I would say that I personally have a pretty high risk appetite. I mean, I wouldn't label myself as risk averse in business, I guess, because I guess if I was risk averse, I'd probably just take all the advice that you read about online about niching down and do one product and do it well and build a business around it. I mean, since the beginning, we've kind of had a bunch of different product lines, and I've even received comments, you know, many times like, well, don't you think you're spreading yourself too thin? And I've never really subscribed to that, just because even if, say, the product doesn't do well when you release it, you learn an awful lot about the processing, bringing that product to life, especially if it's not like for us, if it's non-apparel and it's physical good product. You learn about how, you know, people are interacting with physical good like that. How does it look in the space in which it lives? And how are you going to manufacture it, and all the packaging and everything around it, the experience around it. So I don't think that's an overall negative thing to come away with, especially, you know, if the product didn't sell. You're still learning a lot about it, and then down the road, if you want to revisit it, you know, you can revisit it. If you want to shelf it, just shelf it. It's not a huge deal, as long as it's not eating up a huge amount of, I guess, the capital in which you have to work. I don't see much of an issue with it. As far as taking risks, I mean, it's a risk. I think operating the business without any venture capital is probably about as risky as it can go, because it all ultimately falls back on me. And yeah, I mean, that is about as risky as it gets when you start to get into these larger numbers, and that's all falling on, I guess, technically the business, but it's just me at the end of the day saddling all of this. And but you know what? The reward is that you have full control over your business, and you get to call the shots in which direction the business is going. And that's a trade that I'll take. I don't know what Shawn thinks about that.
No, I mean, I was going to say a lot of the stuff that Marcus does business-wise, I view as pretty risky, but like that doesn't mean I don't believe in it. Like if I didn't believe in it, then I wouldn't be here, because I mean, it's also pretty risky to work at like such a early stage company, you know. just like security and a lot of the other perks you get at working at like a large corporation, you obviously don't get when you're, 2 or 3 person company. um, so I do think about that every once in a while, just like thinking about, I used to work kind of in like corporate America, and like I would, X amount of my paycheck was going to a 401k. I was getting the benefits that the company offered. I didn't really have to worry about like a lot of the other stuff. Like if I was, I need to pay for my own insurance, like health insurance, like that was going to be like through the company. And like all of that kind of changes when, you're still figuring it out, and like you're still figuring out like, oh, could we offer this? Like, could, Marcus offer insurance and like that stuff. So it's just very much more, you might have to deal with a lot of those things on your own in the beginning and hope like, eventually it grows to where you will be able to get those things. But I think obviously like the reward is much, much higher than working in the corporate ladder and like kind of doing that sort of thing. And obviously like we're family too. So there's that whole side of it that the corporate America will never understand. That's kind of what I think.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest trade-offs is really, you don't really answer to anybody, right? Like when you have a job, you have like those meetings, like kind of like pointless-ish meetings, and you have your bosses, and then you have your boss's bosses, and there's a lot of bureaucracy around like decision making, and like when you're small, especially in the beginning, it's like, you have a much higher opportunity for your voice to be heard and actually, make an impact on the bottom line of the business. And on top of it all, it's easy to see tangible growth, right? Like if you're at a Fortune 500 company, and there's not anything wrong with working in corporate America at all, but as an individual in a corporation that has potentially thousands of people, it's hard to kind of see where the impact is, right? Like, I guess you have your performance indicators that you want to hit and stuff, but when it's smaller and you're working alongside the people that are kind of pushing the business forward every day, it's like you really see the growth. Just from like a product standpoint, product volume standpoint, we've literally gone from my parents' basement to this warehouse now that we've outgrown. So you see that growth, and then just the growth in like what we've been able to do project wise. And yeah, you have much more immediate impact, I would say.
100%. Kind of just like link it in what we were talking about before with like running is like, you don't realize it until you take a step back and like look at where you came from. Because like, man, it was a shit show in the beginning when we had stuff. We didn't have a warehouse, and we were in New York, and like shit was coming to our apartment, and like apartments in New York aren't big. So like our apartment was consumed with like products and like boxes and shit and like other stuff.
We had a little one of those like white folding tables that we would set up to do our packing station in the kitchen.
So like you and like oftentimes it can be like, man, this is really stressful. Like I hope this all works out. And then you like take a look and you're like, oh, well, 6 months ago, like, or however long ago, we were doing this there and like doing it at the numbers that time compared to what they are now. And it's like, I think it's a good thing to take a step back and see where you came from. And because it's also good if I was just like, oh wow, we have not made much progress. Like maybe I should rethink this. Yeah.
I mean that kind of wraps up the topics that I had today. I've said this before, but I would like to get back into the swing of just hopping on and talking about it and recapping things and talking about different topics. So if there's ever topics that people that are listening want to hear, feel free to let us know. Drop us, a comment or any way that you want to reach out. DMs are hard on Instagram just because of the volume. I can't really sort through them. But yeah, I appreciate everybody who has taken the time to listen to this. If you can, or if you're willing to, drop a review on whatever platform you're reading this on. It would mean a lot to us.
Listening.
Oh, listening. Yeah. Wow. I don't know why I said reading. But yeah, have a great rest of your day, your night, and we should be back relatively soon.
Goodbye.
Take care.